So welcome everyone. I am so happy to see you here. I appreciate you taking the time on your afternoon to be with us and hopefully get some of your questions answered about PPP loan forgiveness. My name is Kim Dryden. I'm the program manager for COVID specific programs here at WISE Women's Business Center. Our center serves women, entrepreneurs, and business owners at all stages of business throughout Central New York. And we are very lucky to have with us today Andrea Kooritzky of Kooritzky Accounting Services. As some background why this comes up, WISE hosts advising calls. So in the future, if you have any questions whatsoever about any SBA program that supports small businesses, so that includes what we're talking about here today, PPP, but also EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, and then the soon to be opened Restaurant Revitalization Fund, you can book a call with one of the people from our team. Right now it's me, soon it'll be one of our other business advisors to answer any questions you may have. And through those advising calls, a lot of questions have been coming up about PPP loan forgiveness. So if you are at home watching this, scratching your head, you've got a bunch of questions, you are not alone. It can be a little bit complicated, but Andrea is here to sort it all out for us, right, Andrea? You got all the answers. All right, so Andrea, I am going to hand it off to you if you want to introduce yourself a little bit, and then I'm going to get my questions set up and we'll be off and rolling. One other housekeeping note I should have said up front is I have a bunch of questions that I have from advising that I will pose to Andrea, which hopefully will help a lot of our viewers, but put your questions in the Q&A. We will get to that towards the second half or whenever I run out of my questions. So keep those in there, and I will also answer some of those via chat a little bit later on too. So if you don't get an answer from Andrea, you'll probably get an answer from me. All right, Andrea, off to you.
All right, well, thank you, Kim, and thank you everybody for coming today. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Andrea Kooritzky. I'm a self-employed accountant. I work with many other self-employed individuals, small businesses, medium businesses. I've worked with people that have gotten $1,000 PPP loan, always up to about $275,000. And I just want to let you know that it is probably easier to apply for forgiveness than you're thinking. I know there's going to be another range of loan amounts of what everybody's gotten. If you're under 50,000, it is a very easy application. As a side note, I'm going to give you as much information as I can. It's going to be your basic information, but the details for applying, please reach out to your banker or your bank, because each bank has different portals or straight old pen and paper method and different ways how to supply your documents. So just that's a little bit. If Kim, if you want to go with your questions, we can get going. And then if anybody in the audience has questions that differ than what you have, we'll try to get them answered.
That sounds perfect. Okay, so first of all, big picture, let's say I have received PPP funds. It hit my bank account today. What do I need to know to make sure that I am going to be eligible for loan forgiveness?
You need to know what is your covered period. There were two options, 8 weeks and 24 weeks. I believe if you were going for the second round, it was an automatic 24 weeks. I believe most people did opt for 24-week coverage. You cannot begin to apply for that until after your 24 weeks. Right. The second thing you want to know is you want to make sure that at least 60% of that funds are spent on payroll.
And can you break down payroll? What all does that include?
Payroll includes cash compensation, tips, state taxes, health insurance, and retirement.
Got it. So if I am a sole proprietor, that's a group of people we get a lot of questions from at the Women's Business Center. Can I spend 100% of the funds on payroll? How does that work?
Exactly. So when they decided how much of your loan you qualified for, under the old formula, it was your Schedule C profit divided by 12 times 2.5. So basically your whole loan is your profit from whatever tax year they use. So all you would have to use is that amount to get forgiven.
Right. And then if I do plan on doing that, so I'm a sole proprietor and I'm like, this money's going towards me. I don't have many other costs, and I know it's okay to do that. How does the length of the covered period come into play there?
8 weeks will not cover you. So 8 weeks would only be 2 months, and they gave you 2.5 months. So if you're 8 weeks, you would have to still repay that half a month. But I would think most people did get 24 weeks.
Yep, that makes sense. And do people elect the covered period when they are applying?
And they applied, yes.
Right. Okay. And how do I pay myself as a sole proprietor? In what ways is that okay?
If you're a sole proprietor, you're Schedule C, what you would do is you would simply transfer money out of your business account into your personal account. That would be what would be called a member draw. And that's, I know some people call it a salary or a pay, but it's not. It's just your share. You're taking a draw against your share of the profits.
Yep, got it. Okay. So I know that at least 60% of the funds, as you mentioned, have to be spent on payroll expenses and anything that kind of falls under that umbrella. What about that other 40%? What can I do with that?
You can pay rent, you can pay utilities, transportation. Newly added were supplier costs. We can go into that a little further if people were planning on using that. You can use it for PPP, PPE, gloves, masks, and different supplies to keep your business running. But
Right,
those there's a caveat, those must have been ordered before your PPP loan and paid for during the covered period.
So like you have to have incurred that cost.
Correct. At least ordered it. Might not have. So let's say you got the loan today. Last week you put in a purchase order for some masks. They didn't come in. They won't be coming in until next week. That would count as long as you have that purchase order. There is a caveat. Those who run restaurants and have perishable goods, it can be during the covered period. So lettuce, milk, even if it was ordered during the covered period, that would count.
Okay, that makes sense. Are there any expenses that you can spend PPP funds on that are not eligible for forgiveness? So you're allowed to use the money for that purpose, but you're not going to get it forgiven for that purpose?
You can't do that. I know some banks did require some businesses to deposit the PPP funds into a separate bank account, or those that have gotten it, please do not spend anything that's not that cannot be used for forgiveness out of that money.
Right.
Now, obviously, if it goes into one account, you can't separate it. You just need proof that you did spend 100% of those funds on allowable expenses.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Can you walk me through documentation, maybe starting with for payroll? We can start with just not even payroll, but compensation for like a sole proprietor. How do I document that I have paid myself what I'm supposed to pay myself?
Well, as a sole proprietor, one that takes member draws, you would just be supplying that same tax return that you used to apply for the loan. Now, we need to separate out. If you received a loan that was under $50,000, there really is not any documentation that you need to supply. It's a simple 1 or 2 sheet application, probably about 10 questions on it, asking you just to certify that you spent the money on what the money was for. So if you're a sole proprietor under 50,000, you just make sure you keep your tax return ready, and you have a 1-page, 2-page application to sign off on. If you're over 50,000, that's when you're going to need to upload or supply your tax return. Now, if you are, once again, if you're over 50,000, you will want to reach out to your payroll provider to give you a cash compensation report. You're going to want to have copies of any health insurance bills that you've paid, canceled checks, bank statements. For any of the expenses, you're going to want the bill, the canceled check, proof of payment, and your bank statement.
Got it. Okay. I think that's great too, that it's as flexible as it is in terms of the ways in which you can document, especially payment to yourself.
Yes. So it's definitely, if you're under 50,000, whether you had payroll or not, you just need to certify that you use the funds as directed. You did not reduce your head count. You did not reduce salaries more than 25%. And that's something else we can talk about in a few minutes. I'm sure you have questions on that.
Oh, I sure do. How does, I guess, to get into the arena of like, okay, I know I'm going to spend money on, in a way that it will not all be forgiven. So for example, if I, for whatever reason, just decided, you know what, I'm going to split this 50% towards payroll and 50% towards those types of operating expenses that we went over, knowing that, you know, the 60% is the threshold. What does that do to the amount of loan forgiveness I can have?
Will be prorated. So if you did not spend, and please don't make me do math in my head, I know I'm an accountant, I still love my calculator. But let's say of the 60%, 10%, you were 10% below that 60%, then at the max, 90% of your loan will be forgiven.
Right, so it's directly proportionate to that.
Yes, correct.
Okay, that makes sense. I think we can get into employment levels and things like that. So for people with employees, and no longer really talking about the super small businesses or sole proprietors, I know that I need to maintain previous employment levels. What if, for example, there's many scenarios, and I think, you know, walk me through the ones you think are most relevant. But for example, one question I get a lot is, what if my employee won't come back, even though I did offer them their position?
Make sure you have it in writing, and make sure you have it in writing that they refuse to come back, because that will reduce your the required number of your head count. Also, please keep in mind that if you have a government order that you had to remain closed throughout your whole covered period, I do have a couple of clients that were forced to be closed their whole time. Or if you had a partial shutdown, you had reduced hours. I know bars and restaurants just recently are allowed to be open till 11. If your capacity is reduced, if you still have that keep in mind, this is through the end of your cover period, through the end of the 24 weeks, you do not have to worry about keeping your head count to where it was back in January and February. But please keep in mind that if you are allowed to be fully open even one day before the end of your 24 weeks, you must still hire back everybody.
That's interesting. I wasn't aware of that caveat about the 1 day piece of it.
It must be through the end. But even if you were kept closed, as long as you brought back everybody, I believe I'm not going to give a date. There is a certain date that you must bring everybody back by, in order to have a safe harbor on your head count.
Right. And that kind of just goes back to like the intent of this program is the Paycheck Protection Program, getting people back to work, protecting their jobs.
There are definitely plenty of safe harbor areas to help you if you cannot get back to your, what they call a one-on-one equivalent.
Right. So having the same like number of FTEs as you did pre-pandemic.
If somebody refused to come back and you can't replace them, or if by government order your hours or your capacity was reduced and still is reduced. Right.
So things that are out of your control in that sense.
So if you cannot, once again, it's prorated. The max amount of your loan is prorated by your reduction.
Okay, that makes sense.
Don't give up. Apply anyway.
Right. Because it is prorated, it is not a lost cause. If you're one FTE full-time employee under during your application, that's not a reason to throw in the towel. Especially like you said, for people who have received less than $50,000, as it's simpler. Yeah.
So if those are under 50,000, they just have to certify that they did keep a head count, or they were in a government complete or partial shutdown.
Got it. So Can I pay, this is a question I've gotten a couple times, which is nice. Can I pay my employees more than their previous rates?
100%. 100%, yes.
Yep, that sounds great. Just a few more. So for those attendees, I see a lot of questions in the chat. That's great. Or in the Q&A, keep putting them in there and we'll get to those in just a couple of minutes. How about, are there any other like pieces of the safe harbor clause that we have not covered? Because that comes up again and again. So what does this mean and how does this apply to me?
So the safe harbor is just basically if there's a reason why you couldn't get to your full-time equivalent headcount, is keep in mind it's if somebody refuses to come back and you can't replace them, make sure you have it in writing. If you are full or partial shutdown, and that would be another one.
Got it. Okay. I lost my question. I had a follow-up. Hold on. It might come back to me. Oh, how does this get more complicated if you are running payroll for employees versus a sole proprietor that just takes a member draw or an owner's draw?
Self-employed is the easiest. It's just showing them a copy of the tax return you supplied them when you applied for the loan. So if you have employees, it's coming up with the third-party payroll reports. If you do your own payroll, I'm not sure if anybody on here does their own payroll, that's when you'll have to show payroll reports, canceled checks, and bank statements for each paycheck. That's where it gets a little messy and a little complicated. So
Right,
hopefully everybody's using some kind of third-party payroll provider.
Right. And if you're not, you can let us know in Q&A if you have specific questions around that.
But that's simply payroll reports, canceled checks, bank statements.
Yep, that sounds good. So in terms of the process of loan forgiveness, you started talking about it a little bit in that talk to your bank, wherever you got the funds from, go back to them and talk to them about forgiveness, especially in terms of which application you need, if they have any special processes or limitations, like you mentioned, on like document uploading. In general, do you know how long this process takes, what people should expect?
They say they can get up to 6 months they take for a decision. I've seen a turnaround in about a week. I've seen, I think on average, you're talking about 3 weeks once the SBA gets the information. Several banks will review your application and your file, so it might get bounced back and forth for a couple of weeks before it gets turned into the SBA for their final approval. It's pretty fast. I know they say they have 6 months, but in a couple of weeks, you should know.
Mm-hmm. I think the SBA has something on their website around like 90 days is like their max time frame, you know, with caveats about like unless something crazy happens. But I know also that once the SBA approves or gives a decision on loan forgiveness, your bank has 10 days to notify you of that. So that's kind of a nice number if you can. I've recommended people reach out if you haven't heard back on your loan forgiveness. Ask your banker, you know, whoever you have a relationship there, but for just a status report, you know, you can ask them like, has this been submitted to the SBA? Who's the holdup here?
Some banks with online portals do have where you can check your status right online. And I just want everybody to be aware, though, the time frame before you have to start paying back your loan, I believe it is 10 months after your covered period ends. So please don't feel like you have to go out tomorrow and get all worried about getting this loan. You do have plenty of time before the loan has to start being paid back. Please don't wait till the day before, you know, your 10 months to apply, but you do have a good amount of time from the end of the, so if you figure you got the loan and that's 24 weeks, that's 6 months, plus you have a whole year after you apply for the loan to even before it even starts. So.
Right. And then on the flip side of that, you have to have spent the funds before you can submit your forgiveness application.
You have to wait the whole 24 weeks.
Okay. So after your covered period and funds need to be spent, which those things should coincide.
At 100%, yes.
Okay.
I believe most people would have that money spent before the 24 weeks, seeing that it's 2.5 months worth. So the money will be spent before the 24 weeks is up.
Right. That makes sense. Before we hand it over to Carolyn in a second here to talk about some of the questions we have in the Q&A, is there anything related that we did not touch upon that you think is super important? Anything giant I missed?
I think just keep in mind that if you're under 50,000, it's just a 1 or 2 page, 10 to 12 questions certifying that your information is correct.
Got it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to dive into the Q&A and I'll answer via text any questions that are maybe like beyond the scope of PPP forgiveness specifically. But if we have time, we can get into some a little bit beyond that. So Carolyn is our administrative specialist at the Women's Business Center, and she's going to read out some of your questions for Andrea.
Yeah, so the first question that I'm going to read off, my approved loan doesn't have payroll costs checked off for some reason. So does that mean my loan isn't forgivable? I'm a self-employed business owner, self-proprietor, and was also an individual contractor who had to completely change the way I earn a living. I did not have a Schedule C. Am I eligible to pay myself?
Well, if he or she didn't have a Schedule C, what did they use to apply for the loan? You had to submit something to come up with the dollar amount of the loan.
Okay.
Yes.
So if the person who submitted that wants to submit some more information into the Q&A, we can circle back to that. Next question. Will an upgrade of my website to optimize for e-commerce as a result of the pandemic be approved in the 40% aside from payroll?
That is a good question that I would have to look into later. I don't want to say yes or no. I can look into that and we can get back to them.
We actually have a couple questions on this topic. Please explain covered period.
Covered period is from the day you get the loan to the 8 weeks or 24 weeks after. So keep in mind your covered period starts the day the money hits your bank account and ends 24 weeks after.
This question is related to that. Someone says, I wasn't offered the election of a covered period when enrolling for my PPP. Help with the wording of the covered period, which you've already answered. Does 8 weeks mean I received less money than someone with a 24-week period?
It does not. If you weren't given the option, there's two possible reasons for it. One is they received the money one of the first loans out there before it was changed from an 8-week to a 24-week covered period, or I believe after there was so many adjustments to this. After one of the adjustments, it was an automatic 24-week. I hate doing this, but my guess is it's going to be they have a 24-week covered period, because the 8-week was only maybe for the first couple of weeks the applications were out there way back in April of last year.
Okay. What if you are a sole proprietor and borrowed under 50K and did not use a tax return to apply for the PPP loan?
Wow. I'm intrigued as to what bank they applied and what information they did give to the bank in order to calculate their loan amount. That would be the same information that they would use for the forgiveness. Because it is my understanding that if you were self-employed, you had to provide a Schedule C. I believe if you were not in business in 2019, possibly you can show them a profit and loss statement and bank statements. So you would use that same information.
Okay. So I have some more information from the person who did not have a Schedule C. She says that she used her 2019 or estimated 2020 taxes. She doesn't remember which.
So yes, so a Schedule C is part of your tax return.
Okay.
So that's the same thing that you would be using to apply. So my apologies. Schedule C is a schedule on the 1040 tax return.
Looking at some.
Getting that. Cool. One of those lingos. Sorry.
From the sole proprietor who had borrowed under 50K and did not use a tax return, the loan amount was calculated on a payroll formula for KeyBank.
Payroll formula, but where did they get? Maybe they can reach out and we can do one-on-one question just to, I'd like to understand more on what actual forms and where did they pull the numbers from to come up with this payroll formula? Did they use their bank statements? Did they use a profit and loss? There has to be some kind of starting number. What kind of form did they give to the bank to show what they should have applied for?
Okay. Next question. If you are past the 10-month period before you apply for forgiveness, are you out of luck or is there still a way to get the loan forgiveness?
Wow, is anybody even past that yet? That's another thing I'd have to look into. I suggest you don't do that. I suggest within at least a couple months after your 24-week period that you apply. Don't wait. Don't test it.
And the sooner the better in any case.
Yes.
So that person just followed up and said, yes, she passed it. She's already paying it back.
Is she already paying it back or is she, because April? So let's see, it was let's say the middle of April, 6 months after the middle of April would be October, and 10 months from October would be, what, August? So we're not even close to anybody being required to be paying it back. You can still be paying it back anyway, but you wouldn't be required to. I know that they do send out the statements once a month that maybe they feel like, but nobody should be past their 10 months.
Sounds like also reach out and talk to the bank directly and maybe clarify some of this.
It was 8 weeks, April to May, May to June. That would be close. If they had an 8-week covered period, that would be close, but.
She says she did get a statement. She has auto payment set up. So check with the bank.
Yeah, please check with the bank because you should not be required to be paying it back yet. They do send out statements every month.
And they'll take your money. I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
they'll be more than happy for you to continue paying, but you may not have to.
And my guess would be, the next question would be, can I get that money back? That would be a bank question.
Okay. Last question that I have in the chat, in the Q&A, may I use PPP funds to pay idle loan funds?
Actually, your PPP forgiveness is reduced by the idle. Yes, you cannot, yes. Yeah, so wait, are we talking the idle advance or the idle loan? Because it used to be way back before when your PPP forgiveness was reduced by your idle advance. They changed that, but if you do have an actual idle loan, you do have to pay it back. So it will reduce how much you owe for the idle, and you'd have to pay the PPP back.
Yeah, she says it was the loan, not the advance.
Your PPP loan forgiveness will be reduced by the outstanding balance on the idle loan. Oh boy.
I don't have any more questions in the chat. If anyone,
Yeah. So get your last minute questions in if you have them. And I put a link in the chat if anyone, if you're like me and in like 5 minutes after this ends, you're like, got it, thought of my question. You can email me, we'll get you an answer to that question. We also have a lot of good resources on our website. If you go to wisecenter.org and go to our blog, there's lots of stuff about PPP first draw, second draw, and specifically loan forgiveness. You obviously can always check the SBA's website as the main source of truth for anything related to anything PPP, including loan forgiveness. So don't worry if you maybe haven't quite articulated the question in your head yet. You can always reach out. We'll make sure that you get an answer.
Or if I didn't articulate an answer, possibly. And if you reach out to WISE, they stay in contact with me and I can further explain, maybe put us in contact, more of a one-on-one conversation.
Yep. And all of this advising is no cost to all of you watching at home. So no worries there. All right. So I think we are good to go. Andrea, thank you so much. I very much appreciate you. We've got some kudos in the chat. Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate you taking the time and answering questions. Carolyn, Maureen, Michael, and Kelly, appreciate you as well. All right, so that's it. Again, grab those links in that chat. If you need anything else, you can also just check out our website if you need anything. And that is it for this evening. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Hey, everyone.
Oh, we have one last question.
Oh, hi, everyone.
Emily, you snuck that in right under the...
I'm sorry. I just was like, I'm going to grab. Will all the PPP and idle funds have to be reported as income next year?
Please speak to your tax representative about that.
Yeah, I believe, and it depends on the state you're in too. So I know we had one viewer from California. Don't take any kind of like general advice on the internet on this one. Yeah, talk to your tax professional. Oh yeah, you specifically were CA. Talk to your tax professional. All right, I think that's really it. Unless Pamela's got more zingers for us.
Oh, wait, she made the face. Another one?
No.
Keeping us on our toes. I like that. All right. Good night for real, everyone. Thank you. If you missed any of the first part, shoot me an email and I will get you the recording once it is ready. Otherwise, have a great evening. Thank you, everyone.